Welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Berishai, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today to talk about the round one timeline. Or part of this discussion will also entail should you be applying in round one or round two as you evaluate, obviously, your next steps. So applying in round one obviously has to be a strategic move, excuse me, but only if it's obviously done with careful planning. And today we'll talk about and we'll walk through the structured timeline to ensure you have maximizing your chances, but also minimizing stress. Although I can't promise the minimizing stress part because the entire process is quite stressful. This is an interactive session, so I really encourage you to write your questions in the comments. There's been a lot of interest in this session, so I'm really excited about all the questions you guys have. And take notes. Obviously, you'll always have a replay on our YouTube channel if you ever want to go back to this. But of course, as you're taking notes, you are more engaged. And when you're more engaged, you're thinking through the process, which means that you can also bring in your questions to our session. Awesome. So many MBA applicants underestimate how important it is to go through this process in terms of timing when it comes to putting together a strong application. Really a well-timed timeline allows you to present your strongest self, avoiding last-minute scrambling, which happens all the time, and submitting an application that reflects deep thought and strategy. So applying in round one offers oftentimes a distinctive advantage, but only if it's not if it's not just about applying early. So I don't want you to think that, oh, you should apply in round one for everyone. It's about applying when you're fully ready, which means if you can't get your application ready by round one, don't force an application in round one. And I'll talk through more of that. So what I'm going to cover today is why round one, so the key benefits of applying in round one, your MBA application timeline, and profile strengthening strategies, things you need to be mindful of, mistakes to avoid as you go through this process, especially now, given that we are about slightly less than 6 months away until round one deadline. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A at the end, but I do invite you to make sure that you're asking questions along the way. Perfect. So many applicants debate whether they should be applying in round one or round two. And let's talk about why round one can be a game changer for a lot of applicants. So round one does have higher acceptance rate for many schools. So historically, the acceptance rate in round one are significantly higher, sometimes 5 to 8% higher than in round two. Not for every school, of course. This means that in round one, schools are building their class, right? Which means there's a blank canvas for them to choose who they're including in there. That means for you, there are more available seats, greater flexibility in the admission process. You can be one of the few in your area of expertise, in your interest area, that is applying early and therefore obviously increasing your chances of getting in. Schools that there's a significant difference between applying in round one versus round two include Harvard, Booth, MIT Sloan, and CBS, just to name a few. Second reason why round one application can be a strategic benefit for you is, of course, the scholarship advantage. Schools allocate scholarship early to early birds, right? So if funding is really important to you, then applying to round one gives you a better shot at making sure that you secure a merit-based scholarship. Even if you are waitlisted in round one, you actually have a chance to get scholarship if you get off the waitlist by round two, because scholarships are still being distributed during that time, which is different from round two applicants who are waitlisted that by the time they get off the waitlist, there is no funding available. So there is definitely a strategic advantage, even in the less than the ideal scenario of being put on a waitlist. You also have a stronger position for interviews, so admission officers aren't as fatigued yet in the process. This is a very intense period for them as well, as they go through interviewing and making sure that they're selecting and putting together the best class. So you are obviously competing with a group of well-prepared applicants rather than those rushing through last minute. So this can be an advantage or a disadvantage on your part. In terms of time to plan. If you're applying in round one and get admitted, you have several months to plan your transition, whether that's resigning from your job. What do you want to do during the summer? Are you taking that Euro backpacking trip or traveling somewhere? All of those components are part of this. Or maybe you want to do a pre-MBA internship. It allows you to actually prepare that in advance, as opposed to making moves when you are in limbo, not knowing until early April. And then obviously a lot of steps need to take place as you move along. Now, the potential downside of applying in round one, and that is if your application isn't ready by round one. That means you better wait. It's better for you to apply with a well-polished, well-presented application in round two than rushing an application in round one, which means obviously a rushed application is not going to get you in, and obviously you're losing that opportunity to attend that great institution that you have targeted if you submit a less than ideal, less than a well-crafted application. So before diving into the timeline, I just wanted to introduce Sia Admissions. We've had an increase in audience, so some of you may be new to our space, and obviously it's a great opportunity for you to know, what gives me the authority to be here. So Sia Admissions is a boutique admission coaching firm. We specialize in helping high-achieving professionals develop standout application for top business schools. Our process is built on structured storytelling, deep strategy, and customized coaching, ensuring that each applicant showcases the best version of themselves. If you are someone who is considering getting into an M7 or other top-tier business schools, a lot of the applicants that are there have worked with a coach, so you know that that's part of the game. We do offer tailored coaching, tailored guidance to help you navigate the complexities of the MBA admission process. And you can definitely book a consultation call. A link will show up on the screen, as well as in the comment section of the platform that you are joining us, if you want to learn more about how to book a consultation. I am the founder, Susan Bershai. I'm an alumnus of NYU and Yale, and I have been doing this for over 8 years, coaching applicants who are ambitious, making sure that they put together their best presentation of their experiences for top business schools. And that's reflected in our placement rate, which means that 94% of our clients gain admission to at least one of their target institutions. So let's break down your round one MBA application timeline into 3 phases. Each phase has critical milestones that you want to make sure that you are staying on track to prevent last-minute panic, last-minute submission, which oftentimes it's an unideal representation of your experiences. We'll also walk through what you should do and when to ensure smooth and strategic application process. So phase 1, this is 6 to 12 months before the deadline. We are at the cusp of that 6 months period. So if you haven't done any of this, this is like the time to do it. So one thing that if you follow me, you will hear me talk about this all the time. Applications, strong applications, the best application, elite applications, whatever you want to call them, are not built overnight. They're actually built over time. It's a phase that involves preparation, refining, rethinking thinking through that process and really deep planning. So the first component before you dive into anything, right, it's about conducting a self-assessment. Conduct an honest evaluation of your profile. This means the good and the bad, but that does not mean to be fixated on the bad. It just means that you need to assess your profile honestly. We do offer a profile evaluation where you get a written report from me. I look at your resume, I look at what you submit in terms of your responses to our questions, and you get a written report that gives you, the positives and the areas for, that you need to pay close attention to in your application. That can be helpful. So definitely take advantage of that. That will show up on the screen and will be in the comment section of this as well. And that's free, by the way. And once you do this evaluation, you want to look at your leadership experience, you want to look at your extracurricular experience, you want to look at your GMAT or GRE score. Where is it? Is it competitive? If you're still studying for it, what's the time frame that you have? Where are what do your mocks look like? Are you really there yet in terms of the score that you need in order to target the schools that you really want to attend? Obviously, without the test score, you're a little bit in the dark in terms of how competitive you are for any given school. So you definitely want to do this as early as possible. In this time frame, you also want to sit for the GMAT or the GRE preparation. Obviously, plan for between 3 to 6 months of study time. Some people are more comfortable with test taking. They can complete it in 3 months. Some people need a few retakes. So that 6 months window gives you a bit of time to make sure that you can retake if necessary. Taking that test or completing the test early will ensure that your test preparation time is not interfering with the rest of your application preparation, and obviously making sure that you are really focusing and putting your efforts in the right places at the right time, given that all of you will have a full-time job as you're going through this application process. And I had a session yesterday on GMAT Club where I talked about some elements of this. Everyone essentially talks about, having a lighter load in the summer or having a lighter load in the winter, depending on which round you're applying. And every single time a client tells me that, I know that that's actually going to be the opposite of what they just said, because it happens every single time where there's all of a sudden an increase in workload that they didn't anticipate. And you really want to make sure that you're planning early and planning strategically. During this 6 to 12 months period, you also want to research schools and conduct, essentially network with schools. So you want to attend your MBA fairs, you want to attend webinars that the schools are hosting, you want to have campus visits if possible, if you're geographically convenient. You want to engage with students, with alumni, with faculty member or admission representative to get a deeper insights into the schools so that you understand fit. I had a client who essentially went through this process, and fit is, I'm telling the story because it's really related to fit. The client essentially applied to schools and essentially got invited to every school with the exception of the one I told them not to apply to, given that they were not a culture fit. So I'm sharing this information to highlight that culture fit actually plays a huge role in the admission process. And you really want to make sure that you do your due diligence to understand not just what's the brand name, but also how does this fit with your personality. Are you someone who really belongs in that kind of environment? So once you build your foundations, right, it's time to start crafting your application. So we are in that 3 to 6 months period of time. So if you haven't started already, then you definitely are at the tail end of when you need to get started to make sure that you submit a really strong application. And if you want to talk about that, definitely reach out so we can have a consultation call. So at this point, you want to be developing your goals and developing your narratives. So I always say schools don't just, at least top business schools, M7s, top 10, top 15, top 20, they don't just admit candidates, they admit future leaders. And your story needs to connect who you are with where you've been and where you want to go. That entails both the goals, both the narratives, and both obviously to what you want to learn in the future, right? And there are different spaces in the application process where you would be placing different segments of your experiences and the vision that you have for the future. At this point, you also need to identify your recommenders and make sure that they are in alignment. It's important for them to know where you're going, what experiences you are really hoping that they would highlight. And they also need time because they too have full-time jobs. Oftentimes they have families, and in the summertime, they will be going on vacations. During the holidays in round 2, they'll be going on vacation for the holiday. They're taking breaks. So you really need to plan around their availability. Your job is to make sure that you give them all the materials, you give them enough time for them to write a compelling letter recommendation in support of your entire narrative. As we get closer, at this point, it's a little bit early to start writing essays, but it is not early to start working on your resume, to start working on your goals, to start identifying recommenders, to start guiding them through those different processes. Work on your LinkedIn presentation, do your research, finalize your school list. All of this, it's not early to do now. But as we get closer to 3 months, so at the tail end of phase 2, you are going to be shifting then. You get all this other stuff done now, and then you shift to essay writing. So in the essay writing period, it's really important to be obviously strategic because schools look for depth, reflection, and authenticity. A ChatGPT presentation of your essays, of what you want to say, it's not really going to cut it. It is very evident that it's not written by a person. Even if you make some changes, it's going to be very dry, to be very frank. I've seen ChatGPT generated essays and they are quite dry. It's important for you to give reflection, even if you're using the tool as a resource for you. Your reflection is not replaced. Essays, once you go through this process of developing a strategy and then moving on to, developing, strengthening, guiding, getting in the details that you have in your mind, but you remember that you are actually presenting to someone else and they have to understand what you're trying to communicate. You want to obviously polish during this period of time. But it's really important to not over edit, because what happens if you over edit is that you're going to lose your personality. Your personality is what helps them understand that you have the right culture fit. So there is an element of not being super polished that is actually an advantage in your application. But that doesn't mean sloppy. So just to be clear there. Okay, so in the phase 3 is the final stretch. This is 1 to 3 months before the deadline. At this point, you are focused on refining. You should not be working at this point on major developments of anything, right? It is refining your materials to make sure that you have answered all the short answer questions, you have added all the portal documentation that you need, and at this also at the same time, you are starting preparation for interviews. And I'll talk through each one a little bit. So at that phase, 1 to 3 months, once you've done with your essays, you're going to want to ask someone to read your essays that is not you, but preferably someone who doesn't know you intimately. This way they can get a fresh perspective in terms of what you are trying to say, but they don't have the backstory that oftentimes your friend and your family members will have, and they're filling in the gaps that they know if it's not in the resume, right, or in the essay. What will happen in this situation, if they're filling in the details, is that both you and the person reading your essays will miss out on important information that the admission team needs in order to understand what you're trying to communicate. Remember, they don't know you at all. So what you communicate and how much you share, it's actually, it's going to help them build a mental image of who you are. So it's really important to get feedback at this point. Now, it's also important that you don't rewrite your entire essay because you got some feedback. So this is why you want to start this process as early as possible so that you're not doing rewrites at the last minute. A part of our process here at Sia Admissions, once you submit that application, we immediately start with 3 general MBA mock, 3 one-hour sessions essentially of mock interviews. And that is really to prepare you for common questions and behavior interview questions that you will need to understand, to prepare for, because a part of this process is, one, you need to understand how you're going to answer questions, but also you need time to actually practice, because up until this point you were focused on the written form, and now you have to shift to the verbal communication form. Some of you are better than others, so definitely you will need time to prepare and shift. And even if you've had many job interviews, this is different from a job interview. I kind of skipped this part, but the other component here to make sure it's that you are, before you submit, you want to do this at least 2 weeks in advance of your target deadline. You want to make sure that all components of the application are finished, finalized, ready. There's like no track changes, like no errors. What you have in your application matches what you have on your resume, all those details. So you're going to make sure that your essays are uploaded correctly. Make sure no Word documents are uploaded in a application, and all of that minutia details. Your resume is fully polished, is the final version that you want to submit. Your test scores have been sent, are uploaded as well. Your recommendation letters have been also sent. So if they haven't 2 weeks in advance, you absolutely have to make sure that you are connecting with your recommenders. Otherwise, your application will be moved to the next round if the recommendation letters are not submitted. And then obviously submit once you had time to reread it one more time, from a fresh bird's eye view perspective. Now, even if you have a solid application, there's always room for improvement. You want to make sure that as you're evaluating your application, the content that you're presenting, there's an element of doing, right? So you're developing, you're working through them, and then there's an element of reflection. So you have to step back. You have to look if you have demonstrated leadership. That's once it's the written form, but also at this point, even though we're 6 months away, it's better to do something now than not. If you don't have leadership, look for leadership initiatives that you can be involved in, whether that's at work or whether that is in your extracurricular activities. You also want to make sure that you have very clear career goals. Schools want to know that you can make a plan, that you can have a realistic yet ambitious plan for your future. And that is both your post-MBA as well as your long-term plan. At this point, you also want to make sure that you are addressing any of the weaknesses. So that when I talked about the profile evaluation, look at if you have a low GPA, lower than the average class of your target institution. This means that your GMAT or GRE needs to be higher than the average class in order for you to be competitive, because you have to counter the fact that you have a low GPA. That does not mean, however, that because you have a low GPA, you are doomed. This is a myth that needs to be busted. We've helped so many applicants with very low GPAs get into M7s, get into top 20 business schools. So it's not the end of the world. It's just about being strategic in terms of how you present yourself, not fixated on the fact that you have a low GPA. If you've had gaps in employment, you want to make sure that you are addressing that effectively in your application. If you don't have international experience, is there any opportunity for you to have that now and do this, at least take one actionable step in this period of time to make sure that you are strengthening your profile before you submit, whether that's round 1 or round 2. Obviously, all of this is in relation to make sure that you're mitigating any weaknesses in your profile. Some of the biggest mistakes that applicants make is actually something that we definitely need to talk about at this phase, because you want to try to avoid these as you prepare that plan for yourself. First and foremost, starting too late. I cannot tell you how many times people come to us at Sia Admissions to ask for a last-minute review of their application, work through the strategy. At that point, we are fully booked, and most of the very competitive or very strong coaching firms are going to be fully booked in terms of opportunities, so working with someone. So if this is something that you will need, you want to start the process early, even if you need to book for a future, because obviously, this is a first come first serve kind of business, because we just can't wait for people who are not committed, right? So starting too late means that you're going to panic at the last minute, because someone will tell you something that you haven't reflected enough on, and then you will say, oh, I need to rewrite everything, and as a result, you won't have time to actually develop it effectively. So start early. The point of all of this is start early. The other elements that I often see in applicants is they have conducted really weak research. Your essays, your application doesn't genuinely reflect a genuine fit, which is actually really important in making sure that you are admitted. So as I mentioned, at this point, you are at the cusp between you should have started already doing your research and you should start putting your application together. So you want to conduct a lot of research, understand really what the school's differentiating factors are, what the culture looks like, what the opportunities look like there, so that you can make sure that you're maximizing outcomes. Also, another component that another mistake that applicants make is not giving recommenders enough time, not giving recommenders enough material for them to work with in terms of putting together a strong letter of recommendation. And as a result, letters of recommendation sound generic, sound weak. The recommenders, while they want to help you, they're not going to spend the same amount of time you're spending on your application to put together letters of recommendation. So you really need to be there to support them through this process. And you want to do this as early as possible so that they can do their job, which they have committed to doing. And the last thing is over editing your materials. It's not about being overly polished, overly edited. It's really about authenticity. But again, the balance is between making sure that it's authentically capturing all the things that the schools are looking for versus just putting something together really quickly at the last minute. One of the things that I often hear, and when I speak to clients that are already in business schools, is that their peers that are in the programs have definitely invested in working with getting the guidance in refining their application, whether that's small packages or the full comprehensive coaching. So if you want to discuss what kind of support we can provide to you, definitely reach out. You can scan the QR code on the screen, go to siaadmissions.com and request a consultation call. If you're not ready to commit yet, that's totally okay. You can definitely submit a profile evaluation so that we can at least give you some guidance on some of the things that you can take advantage of and make sure that you are working towards. Now I'm going to move to questions. So I would love to hear what questions you have. We have about 2 minutes left, and would love to hear how I can support you. Perfect. All right, let's see what questions we have. Thank you. All right, so one thing before you guys leave, I just wanted to remind you, we are going to have an exclusive session on the 29th. It's a Saturday, so this is a different session than our usual Thursday session. So we're actually working, it's a workshop for those who are applying in round 1. And you should definitely attend this session. There's a limited number of seats because it's going to be conducted through Zoom. It's not going to be available to replay on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So if you want to be on that workshop, definitely register before all the seats are taken. We have at the moment a limit of 20 seats that are available for this workshop session, because obviously it has to be intimate and we can't make it open to everyone. So if you are watching this live, definitely go and register. If you're watching this as a replay, definitely go and register for that one as well. Perfect. Okay, so let's go with the questions. How far? Okay, so is it true that the pre-MBA experience should be aligned with post-MBA goals to secure and admit into a program and job after MBA? There needs to be a correlation. It doesn't need to be, people do make transitions in terms of what they do pre and post MBA. However, it's always anchored on something you've experienced. So it's not like, oh, I heard private equity is very lucrative. I have never done anything in finance before. Therefore, I want to go into private equity. That's not realistic. So that's not going to happen. So, but if you say, I have been in consulting and I've worked with clients that are focused in energy, and I'm really interested in making a transition from consulting to energy, that's feasible, right? That is something that you can do. You have transferable skills. So yes and no is the answer, but it does need to be. It doesn't need to be an apples to apples, like you have done this in the past, therefore you need to continue this. But rather, it can be, I have had this kinds of exposure, and this is the reason why I want to make this impact. I want to change this segment about this industry that I'm interested in working in. All right, last question. How to get scholarship for round 3, and what sort of profile are the best fit for round 3? Round 3s are honestly very, very difficult to get a scholarship. At that point, even round 2s, it's kind of like when the scholarship ends. So if you want a scholarship, if you need a scholarship to get in, apply in round 1. That's the easiest way. And in terms of if you're still adamant, so if you're like, okay, well, won't get scholarship, I still want to apply in round 3. The kinds of applicants that they're looking for, it's unicorns, applicants that are different from others, applicants who have unique experiences that the school may not have in the class. Because you have to remember, as a round 3 applicants, you have a few challenges. One, you have to be better than the class profile of round 1 and round 2 applicants that have already secured and said yes. And you have to be better than the people who are on the wait list in order for you to be admitted. Right? So that's a kind of a huge hurdle to go through. So you have to have very distinct experiences, and you definitely have to have some kind of unique value proposition that you're presenting to schools in order for you to be admitted. But I would say definitely you may want to just recognize that scholarships in round 3 are going to be almost impossible to get. And for that reason, I suggest round 1 is better. Although that means you have to wait a year before you get started in your MBA journey, or consider January term for some schools that offer the January term option as well. But you have a higher chance of getting in there than in round 3, especially if you're a more traditional applicant, like a, engineer, or, a consultant or investment banker or something like that. Excellent. So I will see you next Thursday, where we will talk about waitlists. So this may not be relevant for you specifically that are considering round 1. However, you can still join that, because obviously you want to try to avoid being on the waitlist. No one likes to be in limbo. So join that session to learn what are some of the things that one can do. Why is someone placed on the waitlist? So you can learn more about that and what actions to take if you are placed on the waitlist. If you have friends who are in that journey, definitely share that as well. And then on the 29th, we will have the exclusive session. So if you haven't registered for that, definitely register to make sure that you secure your seat to be in the room where we're going to workshop round 1 applications. Thank you again, and I will see you next week.